My contention is that machines can be constructed which will simulate the behavior of the human mind very closely. There would be plenty to do in trying, say, to keep one's intelligence up to the standard set by the machines, but it seems probable that once the machine thinking method had started, it would not take long to outstrip our feeble powers. There would be no question of the machines dying, and they would be able to converse with each other to sharpen their wits. At some stage, therefore, we should expect the machines to take control.
I think our future is machines. We already are machines.
Machines are setting their own agenda to a very large extent.
In this future world, I think human beings at best have a niche existence, perhaps as objects of art, not even as pets.
Master of the sky above and the earth beneath, modern man applies his utmost ingenuity and inventiveness to the pursuit of speed and comfort in search for his most deeply desired objective, happiness. He has surrounded himself with ever more complicated mechanisms to reduce mental and physical effort to a minimum.
Technology, advanced technology in particular, has a tremendous beauty. It may just be the new food mixer you've got in your kitchen, or it may be, the latest concept car you see at the motor show, or it may be an elevator in a high-tech office building. High technology has a tremendous beauty.
Year by year, the number of appliances and gadgets contributing to man's convenience multiply around him.
The electric engine was once a powerful and startling marvel, but today we all own innumerable electrical engines. We don't know where they are. We don't know what they're doing. I think most people would be very, very hard-pressed to say exactly how many electric engines they have in their home and automobile. It's virtually impossible. You just don't know. We never think about them. They're all around us. They're operating constantly, and they're just part of the background.
You could trust machines. They took good care of you. The only trouble with them was, well, they knew so much. They were always so damn smart and busy. They made you feel kind of useless, almost like you were standing in bare light.
Some of the stuff going on in the scientific labs has actually jumped beyond some of what we read in science fiction. So I think that separation that we have between what we call science fiction and science has lost quite a bit in the present time. And now the real question is what our goals are in terms of what we want to do with this new technology.
The serious industrial uses for robots like Geigen in the future include the handling of dangerous radioactive materials in the realms of nuclear physics. However, it could have its domestic uses too, either as a servant or even as an obedient companion. Geigen is obviously one male who can be relied upon not to step on his partner's feet.
One scientist to another.
With my best-known story about robots, who can replace a man, you have robots which have independent movement and to a certain extent, independent programming. The question I was interested in was, how would they talk?
The machine uses only two sounds produced electrically. One of these represents the breath. The other, the vibration of the vocal cord. Let's see how you put expression into a sentence. Say, she saw me, with no expression. Now say it in answer to these questions. Who saw you? Whom did she see? Did she see you or hear you?
The men broken down, all men have broken down. That is a logical deduction. That is a logical deduction. For if the machine had broken down, it would have been quickly replaced. But who can replace a man?
I was very reluctant to accept the idea of robots that were identical with human beings. I think that's very far in the future. It's more likely that human beings will come like robots.
Count them on your right hand.
Well, he's almost human. He wasn't so big, I'd take him for an engineer.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5? Well, that's absolutely correct.
How can he do those things, Jim?
He's full of motors, gears, cams, and photoelectric cells. You could fill a book with all the electromechanical principles involved in the thing.
All he lacks is a heart and a brain.
If you ask me, I'd say he had nothing but brains.
Well, then all he lacks is a heart.
As we grew up, we always had a sense of a robot being something that easily broke down, fell over, was damaged. And recently, I think we've come with a concept that the biomaterials and industrial materials that we use to make a robot are actually more durable than human parts.
Andrew Martin studied the robot's right hand. The fingers were long and shaped into artistically metallic curves, so graceful and appropriate that one could imagine a scalpel fitting them and becoming temporarily one piece with them. There would be no hesitation in his work, no stumbling, no mistakes.
Robotics is trying to produce efficient programs that produce the perceptual and motor effects that our nervous systems have. And I think it's capturing sort of another slice of human thinking. Now, someday when we have fully intelligent machines, I think all these slices will have to be assembled into some kind of sandwich. So the machine is able to react to its world. In the near future, over the next 50 years, we will have robots working in our homes and around us in other ways. And these robots will be, in fact, much nicer on an individual basis than the average human being we meet. Present-day robots have minds that are only starting to get to a state where they learn some of their behavior. One of the most advanced examples of that are our robot trucks and the Alvin program, which is able to drive tens of kilometers without any kind of human input.
There was no one in the truck. The sun glittered and flashed on empty cabs. The wheels turned themselves. You couldn't think about it too much. You'd go insane if you thought about it too much.
This mathematical robot whose brain consists of valves, relays, and diodes, replaces a great number of mathematicians.
Are people becoming obsolete? The giant electronic brain has started cogitating at the University of Pennsylvania. It's made a vacuum tube, like your radio, and it can add up a column of figures a yard long in a second. It's the world's first electronic computer.
The forward march of its progress can only be limited by the frontiers of the human mind.
Alan Turing imagined a development of computers far beyond the capabilities of the 50s to a stage where what they did, in fact, matched what human beings do in their minds. He imagined that one might have a conversation with a machine, and if a machine was able to answer in a similar way, then it would be useful to simply treat it as if it were conscious, regardless of how it achieved those answers.
Drink?
Drink. Are you sure?
Yes.
Yes.
Stop.
Stop.
Computer. Show 3. Computer 3.
We've actually made computer programs that convinced people that they were actual persons for short times. Eventually, you find some chink in its knowledge or some really foolish reply. But as we learn more about the mind and more about machines, we can fool people more and more. And finally, if you can fool them for all time, then you might as well say it's safe. What's the difference?
Forgive me for being so inquisitive, but during the past few weeks, I've wondered whether you might be having some second thoughts about the mission.
How do you mean?
Well, it's rather difficult to define. Perhaps I'm just projecting my own concern about it.
I don't think there's any reason for machines to be like us. I don't think I think it's a funny thing. It's sort of built into our idea of what artificial intelligence would be, that we should strive to create something that really would pass the Turing test, sit behind the curtain and convince us that it's a shopkeeper from Middlesex. I mean, what's the point? It's not, that's not really the smart machine we need. I suspect that when we do have something like real artificial intelligence, it will be a lot more elegant.
In talking to the computer, one gets the sense that he is capable of emotional responses. For example, when I asked him about his abilities, I sensed a certain pride in his answer about his accuracy and perfection. Do you believe that Hal has genuine emotions?
Well, he acts like he has genuine emotions. Of course, he's programmed that way to make it easier for us to talk to him. But as to whether or not he has real feelings is something I don't think anyone can truthfully answer.
You could have a machine that was enormously intelligent and perhaps would not even be able to speak. But you'd be able to tell that something was going on there merely by the fact that it could manipulate its environment or it was carrying out purposeful behavior. I mean, it might not be conscious, it might not have a soul, but it would definitely be an entity of some kind.
We could make them very much like us if we understand enough about how we work, or we can make them very different. Maybe there's some mathematical way of thinking that's very precise and very powerful and very alien, and you would use such a machine to make certain kinds of decisions, but you wouldn't understand very well how it works, and it wouldn't understand how you work. I study the images of human beings, analyze their actions, striving from their movements and the words they speak to evaluate their intelligence and their potentiality. My final opinion is not high, and yet I suspect that in their slow fashion, these beings built the machine which is now my main opponent. The question that occurs to me is, how can someone create a machine that is superior to himself?
I don't think we could directly build a machine which was more intelligent than ourselves, because we wouldn't have the intelligence to do it. But if we can give machines ways of changing their own rules, right, and ways of making judgments about whether or not the results of those changes are useful or not, right, well then certainly in principle and perhaps even in practice we could build machines that are more intelligent than ourselves. I mean, we've already built machines in a small number of very limited areas which are certainly more successful, more efficient than ourselves. I don't know whether you want to call that more intelligent or not, but certainly if you had two human beings doing the same task and one of them got the right answer very, very much more often than the other person, you would say that they were more intelligent.
I tend to agree with the suggestion that if we invent a computer that is as intelligent as a human being, the day after it will be more intelligent than a human being. I don't see why our level of intelligence should represent any particular kind of limit.
In a lot of ways, the modern computer has done things that man couldn't conceivably do. It was argued back in the 1950s that you couldn't build a computer that could play chess. Then it was argued that you couldn't build a computer that could play chess well. Then it was argued that you couldn't build a computer that could ever beat a master at chess. And now there's a few grandmasters that still can beat all the computers, but some of the best games are between the big computers.
If you have these computer systems that have changed themselves so much through their own learning experience from their initial state, that even though they're able to solve the problem you've given them, you don't know how they're doing it, then you're really in a pretty dangerous situation.
Hello, Hal, do you read me? Do you read me, Hal?
Affirmative, Dave. I read you.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What's the problem?
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
What are you talking about, Hal?
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
I don't know what you're talking about, Hal.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me. And I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen.
Computer, play 10.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
You see this tradition now of man actually creating machines that have gone beyond what any individual can do. And we're getting back into a corner of what is it that man still does better than a machine.
Cyberspace, a consensual hallucination experienced daily by billions of legitimate operators in every nation, by children being taught mathematical concepts, a graphic representation of data abstracted from the banks of every computer in the human system. Unthinkable complexity, lines of light ranged in the non-space of the mind, clusters and constellations of data, like city lights receding.
The cyberspace idea came from watching kids play arcade video games in the pre-Nintendo days when you couldn't get the experience anywhere else. And I wasn't really watching what they were doing when they played the games. I was sort of looking in from outside and watching their body language. And they really seemed to me that they wanted to be behind the screen. They wanted to get through the screen into that sea of data where they were where they were manipulating things, and on a particle level, in a sense, they're already there.
I think what's interesting about Gibson's book in cyberspace was one of the first places where we talk about stepping out of the body completely and stepping into a world where the body is only a limitation and has really no value. And that's an important leap of faith. I think we're not really ready for that kind of step, although to a certain extent, every time someone sits down in front of a computer keyboard and gets involved in being inside of the computer, they've essentially stepped out of their body into that computer world. The reality model that we have is not only biologically determined, but it's culturally determined. In the software world, we can really go in and change things in a dramatic way. And we can change things from day to day. In the morning, we can look one way and be tall. In the afternoon, we can be short. So I think it's much more up to the individual to decide what that person wants to look at.
I think the fact that electronically an illusion of reality can be created that is more convincing than the everyday reality we inhabit in our ordinary world is, an extraordinary development with all sorts of consequences. When we watch a murder mystery, we won't be watching someone else commit a crime, but if we want to, we'll be able to play the criminal or the victim. Now, I think all this will have enormous repercussions on the whole sort of moral basis on which we stand, because we will be able, for the first time, to play with our own psychopathologies as a game.
There's no there. They taught that to children, explaining cyberspace. She remembered a smiling tutor's lecture in the arcology's executive creche. Images shifting on a screen, pilots in enormous helmets and clumsy-looking gloves. The Euro-electronically privative virtual world technology linking them more effectively with their planes. Pairs of miniature video terminals, pumping them a computer-generated flood of combat data. The vibro-tactile feedback gloves provided a touch world of studs and triggers. As technology evolved, the helmet shrank. The video terminals atrophied. No there.
When Angie looks at cyberspace in Mona Lisa Overdrive and says there's no there, echoing Gertrude Stein's initial impression of Oakland, actually. What she's saying is that information has become extra geographical. It doesn't really have anything to do with where it is. If you're on an information net and you're looking for information, the question of where these electronic impulses are going in the physical world to locate the information you need is completely beside the point. Cyberspace is where a long-distance telephone call takes place, but it's also where the bank keeps your money. And cyberspace is where your medical records are stored. All of this stuff is out there somehow in a relationship to all the other bits of it, and there's really no point in thinking about its geographical location.
People have made a big deal of computer literacy since computers were first invented, but I think that network literacy over the long run is likely to be at least as important, probably more so. Linked computers are just a vastly more potent phenomenon than a computer sitting by itself, because now you have means of communication and access to information that is global in scale. I mean, it's just fantastically huge.
I think that the computer as a sort of discrete object that one owns and values and is very, very aware of, I think that will become a very quaint and antique concept. Computers will become small and transparent and finely invisible and sort of spread out through everything. And everything will be slightly smart, and everything will be interconnected, and we simply won't be aware of it.
We've got to learn to live in a realm of invisible technologies in order to master the future. I think we're more and more at the mercy of advanced computerized systems applied to public health, to social and economic situations of all kinds. I mean, the conference of computers may decide that it's not worth immunizing some section of the third world against malaria. It's simply not cost effective.
The difficulty, I think, would be is if we build machines which are complex enough, but to a very large extent they can set the agenda. They can decide what the problems are that need solving. And, of course, then it depends on what criteria they're using, what they're regarding as important. And if what they regard as important is not the same as what we regard as important, because we haven't built them in such a way as to ensure that our values, our criteria of what's important are in there, well, then there could be trouble.
As machines evolve in the future, of course, they may come to regard humans as kind of rather unnecessary curse.
One of the problems with artificial intelligence is that when we do think we're able to make smart machines, maybe the first 100 or so of them will be insane.
It took millions of years for man to evolve from a super ape into a thinking animal. But during the past 30,000 years of increasing gadgetry, man has backslid mentally and physically. Technology perfects machines that even feeble minds can operate.
Honey, come on over here, sugar bun. This machine just called me an asshole.
More slowly than others. Only one thing is completely certain this morning, and that is no machine is to be trusted. Unplug all the electrical appliances. If you have a truck or car,
The car is probably the last of a previous generation of machines. It's the last machine that the average person can control. It's the last machine that stands between the driver and life or death.
In his vision of a car crash with an actress, Vaughan was obsessed by many wounds and impacts, by the dying chromium and collapsing bulkheads of their two cars meeting head-on in complex collisions endlessly repeated in slow-motion films, by the identical wounds inflicted on their bodies, by the image of windshield glass frosting around her face as she broke its tinted surface like a death-born Aphrodite, by the compound fractures of their thighs impacted against their handbrake mountings, and above all, by the wounds to their genitalia, her uterus pierced by the heraldic beak of the manufacturer's medallion, his semen emptying across the luminescent dials that registered forever the last temperature and fuel levels of the engine.
We're not natural creatures, most of us. And the technology of the last 20 years seems to me to its hallmark is that it gets closer to us. It's closer to the skin. It's the Walkman earphones as opposed to the great big clamshell kind. And if you continue that trend, it's going to grow right into you.
To a certain extent, we are already able to build an artificial person. When you look at the different parts of the body that we already build as artificial parts, we look at pacemakers, we look at implants for the eye, we look at prosthetic joint replacements, we look at many parts of the body now that we're already replacing. Each year, in the fall, I usually read William Gibson's Neuromancer to remind me of the things that he had talked about. And I've read it over the past 5 years, each year. And each year I see different things in the book that we're doing now that we weren't doing just 5 years ago. So there are parts of this book that's almost like a timetable of things that we're doing rapidly year by year.
You have 15 toxin sacs bonded to the lining of various main arteries case. They're dissolving. Very slowly, but they definitely are dissolving. Each one contains a mycotoxin. Do the job, and I can inject you with an enzyme that will dissolve the bond without opening the sacs. Then you'll need a blood change. Otherwise, the sacs melt in your back where I found you. So you see, Case, you need us.
What the characters gain in my fiction by internalizing the machines is usually a degree of efficiency, some sort of task-related efficiency. As for what they lose by doing this, I don't know. They become further from us, but I've always been quite open to the idea that they somehow remain human.
He was 38 years old and had been reshaped according to the state of the art at the time of his conception. His hormonal balance had been altered slightly to compensate for long periods spent in freefall. He had no appendix. The structure of his heart had been redesigned for greater efficiency, and his large intestine had been altered to produce the vitamins normally made by intestinal bacteria.
Intimate technology, the use of technologies is an internal thing, part of one's body rather than some remote, boffin-type high-tech system. That's just been a leitmotif in cyberpunk work, that we're interested in sticky technology, stuff that adheres or stuff that burrows inside you, and stuff that it's difficult to tell from yourself. Many of these things in 1955, for instance, would have been considered just monstrous and quite perverse acts. And today they're sort of things that one does because one feels glamorous. Now, as technology advances, I think the radicality of these kinds of alterations, are also going to advance. And we'll have the same attitude that we might about a facelift for, say, the injection of small machines to clean plaque off your circulatory system, or really advanced hormone treatments that actually do give you the skin of a teenager on your 80-year-old body and that sort of thing.
I sometimes wonder what my great-grandfather would think of us. I mean, he might not think that we were quite human. It's entirely possible that he wouldn't. I'm inclined to suspect that we might not even be able to recognize our great-grandchildren. I think that's a real possibility.
We're changing really at a fundamental level conceptually how we look at our design. So man is getting involved in his own design to better design himself. And that really is an issue with limits, because we are looking at redesigning what we consider normal to do and trying to come up with a better design for the human body than we've had before.
We've come to a world where Mary Shelley's worst fears are manifest. Except it's happening all over the world. It's not just one guy in a laboratory somewhere.
My creatures, my robots, they only have flesh as muscles and bones and no intestine, because really in the future probably you only can make it with steel and plastic and no more organic stuff, without man, without human help.
A secret organization of scientists developed a biomechanoid. It is harmonically and aesthetically composed of human limbs as arms and legs, or upper arms and thighs. In the mountain San Gotardo, the master control is located, a supercomputer. Almost all the functions of the body are eliminated and replaced by transmitter, receiver, sensor, and radar.
This will be not only a mechanical arm and leg, it will be a person, and here in this connection will be the brain or the computer and whatever. And what we are this with cancer. Cancer is the head, the whole body. Only the legs and the arms are godlike.
Our biological bodies, I think, are wonderful things. They're the result of several billion years of evolution. They contain many answers to problems of survival and how to act appropriately in various circumstances. But they're shaped by a design mechanism which is much slower than the design mechanism that is now building robots. This means that in a coevolutionary sense, we're falling behind. There is no distinction, ultimately, between a sufficiently complex machine and a biological entity.
From my point of view, the brain is a machine. It's the biggest, most complicated machine that we know.
We are already able to build an interface between a computer chip and the brain.
Benson had to be interfaced. The locking in would be accomplished by an induction unit that worked through the skin. The patient's biological brain, and indeed his whole body, has become a terminal for the new computer. We have created a man who is one single large complex computer terminal. The patient is a readout device for the new computer, and he is as helpless to control the readout as a TV screen is helpless to control the information presented on it.
imagine a direct way of transferring a human consciousness into a machine brain, because the entire state of a mind should be representable as a data structure which can be frozen in mid-thought, copied onto another machine, and then resumed in execution from there.
We use the word downloading for the process of copying the contents of your brain and all the processes into some other machine. And so that then there's a copy of your knowledge and personalities and dispositions and emotions and everything. And in the long run, I think this is the most practical way to deal with disease and mortality. So people will replace themselves by perfect copies, but copies that don't get sick. And then they'll have to figure out something else to do with their life and money.
Instantly, I am part of his nervous system, under his control. We're like one superhuman individual, he says. That dream I've had can come true. Man and machine working together can solve problems no one has more than imagined till now. The planets, even the stars, are ours for the taking, and physical immortality can probably be achieved.
If we could extend our brains, if we knew how they work, add more parts, then we're unlimited. But right now we're imprisoned in a body that has only a certain amount of capacity, only a certain amount of intelligence. It only lives 100 years, which is ridiculous. And anybody who's satisfied with that deserves to die.
Really, you wouldn't want to wait until senility had set in. You'd want to have it done when you were in your prime. And if it doesn't do anything to you, then you could do it. You could do it infinitely. It would be like dubbing cassettes. And then there could be 50 of you. But where would you be then? You'd be in a Moorhead story. I think our sense of unique identity will be weakened. If there are 10 copies of us, it no longer will be a tremendous tragedy if one of them is terminated in one way or another, because most of what we are will be preserved in the other 9. So there will be no need for quite such a strong sense of self-preservation.
We won't be quite so concerned about personal survival. You might want to say, well, I have certain virtues that I admire, and this other person has other abilities. When will computer science advance enough that we could merge these abilities and have the best of both persons, or the best of 100 persons?
The desire to escape the limitations of mortality would seem to me to be the obvious goal of the scientific program. My doubts come in when I wonder, who are we going to do this to? I mean, you may want to live forever, but do you want your parents to live forever? You know, do you want Ronald Reagan to live forever? And who are they going to do this to first? Are they going to do it to benign philosophers on the order of Dr. Minsky, or are they going to do it to political despots in Central America? Wealthy cocaine lords. What if all the Medellin cartel put all their money into immortality? We've got Carlos in a box here. He says you have to die.
The unintelligent user of gadgets still retains the mentality of primitive man. He resorts for moral support to mumbo-jumbo, just as did his savage ancestors. Machines get better and better, illogical beliefs persist. Mechanized and moronic man moves toward extinction. Any questions?
It's very difficult to say what will be lost, because we're extremely sort of closely committed to the idea of our own emotions, and we judge our lives by the strength and quality of our emotions. But of course, it may be that emotions, far from representing the best of human nature, actually represent an irrelevant aspect of our minds, and that if only we can get rid ourselves of emotions, the machines may do this for us, we'll move on to a completely different and more advanced mental plane.
I wonder what it would be like when the background noise of the body stops. Actually, I find that kind of wonderfully scary thing to imagine, and it's something that no one's ever experienced. So it's very interesting in that regard, too. It would be a completely new experience. I don't know whether it would be a human experience. It would be a new experience. I'm inclined to think that experience would signal the start of the post-human era.
No one feels there's any single central mystery anymore. It's all in the matter of details. So the secret of life turned out to be rather boring. A terribly complicated bunch of not very interesting bits of machinery. When I argue with someone about this, they say, but the machine part is not important, it's the spirit and it's the soul. And to me, that's an insult.
I don't know whether the concept of soul will survive in the world explanation of future superintelligence. It may or may not make sense when the world is viewed at greater detail with greater knowledge.
And when he was nothing, compressed at the heart of all that dark, there came a point where the dark could be no more and something tore. The Quang program spurted from tarnished clouds. Case's consciousness divided like beads of mercury, arcing above an endless beach the color of dark silver clouds. His vision was spherical, as though a single retina lined the inner surface of a globe that contained all things. If all things could be counted.
In the past, machines and living things were two entirely different kinds of entities, but the developments in thinking machines and in machines that ultimately can reproduce themselves make that difference more and more moot.
If you like the we versus them, then we will have to fight them, and maybe we should prevent them from ever existing. But if you think of these are the children that we'd like to have, then they are you, and you want to do the best thing for them. And I'm not going to sit here and tell everyone what they should do about this problem. It wouldn't be much use. Most people will say, oh, that's just science fiction, and they'll worry about it when the time comes that the decision has to be made.
I don't feel fear as much as a sort of elegiac sorrow. I think that because it seems to me that what we are now, which, heaven knows is not all that admirable, is on its way out. I think we've created, the artifacts we've created are in very direct ways starting to affect our evolution. The way I feel about these entities is truly as children. I believe we're in the process of building a new generation, and we can do the best job that we can, but at some point they're going to be on their own, and we can wish them well and slowly fade away.
Next week, Without Walls explores the new nightmare that Mother Nature will turn sour
and seek revenge for thousands of years of human mistreatment. Authors Kurt Vonnegut and Michael Crichton join leading scientists in examining what could happen when nature says no.